Okay, my name is Corey Pinkston.
I'm Amber Smith.
Karate.
Soraya Shepard.
Okay, so looking at all the questions for this week, talking about just freedom and with all of the different readings and videos that we had to do. The first question says, how do we achieve fairness for all?
So I feel like a big part of being able to achieve fairness for all is being able to instill the attitude in everybody that it even needs to be a thing in the first place, because I feel like there's so much like bigotry happening, and there's so much, I don't know, there's so many people who are just unwilling to see the other side and other people's opposing views and willing to respect and allow those views to live in this world with that. I think that one of the biggest issues really is just that, having respect for everybody's views no matter what they are. And I don't know, I have lots of thoughts going through my head about the fairness for all thing, but I think that that would probably be like step one, is people being more respectful and understanding of everyone being different.
Yeah, I also think that it starts with teaching people what fairness actually means. I think that a lot of people now think that fair means equal, at least equal property or living status, I guess. And instead, it's supposed to be equal in opportunity. And I think that that's what the government's job is to make sure that everybody has equal opportunity to succeed. And but I feel like now people think that fairness means that you have what I have and you can do what I do, and that's not the case at all. And so I think that it should start with reminding everybody that fairness doesn't mean that. It means if you work hard enough, you can have these things. But and I think that the government can have their hand in that, but not in I guess trying to control what everybody has and does. It's more, if you work hard enough for this, that's what you get.
I think something we need to teach people is that in order to achieve fairness for all, we have to teach that life isn't fair. I mean, no matter how many times we try to be fair and not offend somebody, somebody's not going to be happy. But if we teach people to have the tolerance that life isn't going to be fair, not everybody's going to agree with you, then it would be easier to be fair with other people. If that makes kind of sense.
So then I guess kind of like a follow-up question, because yeah, is that everyone is like, oh, they disagree with me, like that's not fair type of thing, which is totally ridiculous. But then I guess a follow-up question would be like, how do we teach people? Because obviously if a person doesn't want to like accept what we're telling them, then they're obviously not going to listen. But how do we go about like telling everyone like, hey, because like in what we had to read for Tuesday with all of the different examples of when they wouldn't bake a cake or do flowers or whatever, if the concept of fairness, they would be like, okay, I'll just go to one of these other many places that are totally willing to do this for me, instead of, being all offended and listing all of these wrongs that happened against them. That one got me the most. If you guys remember that one where they sued him and they're like, we can't sleep at night, this, that. And I was like, grow. But anyways, how do we get across to people that you all just said, if that makes sense?
I don't know. Because I mean, we're talking about trying to change the attitude and thoughts of every person in our society, and we know that that won't happen. But um, I I mean, I guess if we're just talking about us four here, maybe we can just try to be examples and try to show people what it's supposed to be like, I guess, with our social media and our friends. If we are standing up for fairness and are trying to help our little communities understand that, I guess, some things just don't matter and people make too big a deal out of things. Like, it's ridiculous that that woman was sued for not respecting, I guess not even not respecting, but not wanting to participate in that man's wedding ceremony. And I I don't know. I don't know how we do it, but I guess we can each try to start with where we're at, and hopefully it will have a ripple effect and other people will understand and try to share that with others. But yeah, I don't know.
So I feel like, I don't know either, by the way, but I feel like part of the big issue that I keep seeing is that, like we saw in all those readings about all the offense that was being taken and how hurt those people were, is that in religious freedom they say that you're free to practice what you believe, and all of that, as long as you're not hurting others. And so that's where a lot of these activists and people who are pretty radical are coming from, is that they're saying that first of all, they're saying that that we're infringing on their rights, but they're also saying that we're hurting them. Like, even if it's just like an emotional well-being, that we are actually hurting them. And so that's where I think I have a hard time even responding, because I don't know how to respond to that, because one, it's not fair to discount their feelings, because maybe they really are hurt. And I mean, some of them are a little over top, like that one where they sued them. That one was crazy. But I do think that in a lot of cases, like, so how do you really respond to it? And how, like, because there's never going to be fairness. That word is just so hard. Like, it's just really not ever going to exist. And because someone's always going to, I think it's just a matter of being able to be tolerant and accepting and respectful. But at the same time, their argument being that we actually are hurting them, and I just don't know how to actually respond to it.
I think it kind of just, like you said, goes back to teaching tolerance. I mean, if we are hurting them, then, and we don't mean to, like, we're not doing it intentionally, then that's kind of on them. Because it's like being offended. You choose to be offended. But if you are able to have like an open discussion or open conversation with open hearts with each other, then I think that's a better way to get you guys to be kind of fair, even when they still might be hurt and you might not change your beliefs, but at least there's like some type of communication. I think the biggest thing in trying to achieve fairness, which will never happen, is open communication. Not putting blame on each other, not trying to discredit what each other's feeling, but just open communication.
I really like all of the points that you guys brought up. Going along with the open communication thing, there's a guy on YouTube that my husband watches, very political person. He's actually pretty cool, but he will actually like go, I don't know where he does it, but he goes on like to the streets basically in different parts of, I have no idea where, like large areas, and he'll have like a sign that says, I'm, pro-life, change my mind, or I believe in this, I believe in having guns, change my mind, or just different things like that. And he invites people that like obviously don't agree with it, but he has conversations with them. And like some people, like, they won't be convinced no matter what, but then there's other conversations. They're like, oh, okay, I can see where you're coming from. And I think that's a good avenue, is to have that good communication. And then I think what I was thinking about when Corey was talking about, I feel like we need to be influencing our children as well, like teaching them that titled this, that, they shouldn't judge others. Because like when I was growing up, like, not that my parents didn't teach me to judge others, but I was always of the mindset of like, oh, like they drink, well, they're obviously, off the beaten path, something's wrong with them. And like that was just like my that's a word, naiveness. I was naive. And like, I've learned better now. Like, you don't flat out just be like, okay, well, can't talk with them because they're whatever, you know? And so I think it's important that we also, as well as like influence those around us and on social media, that we need to be teaching our children as well the proper way to do things, because I think like that can start like a reaction. I mean, obviously it's not like a whole society-wide thing, but if everyone were to do that, like even if all members of the church were to do that, like there would be, I feel, a lot greater understanding of the aspect of tolerance in general. But yeah, so then the next question, if you guys read about this, which I didn't, is how do we address third-party lawsuits and what is the legal precedent for them?
Okay, so I read the reading this week, and I have no idea what they're talking about. So I'm not sure I'd be able to have much help.
So I guess let me bring up the question. How do we address third-party lawsuits? I tried to Google this because I wasn't quite sure what a third-party lawsuit was, but from what I saw, I think that it's like if somebody is sued, they try to bring in another thing that maybe influenced the outcome, I guess. Like, I'm just trying to think of that lady who was sued at her, was it a flower shop? Yeah. Like, I don't know what the third party would be in that. Um, Let me try to pull up the definition and see if I can go from there. So it says, like, when you file for a workers' comp and sue a third party for a work injury, it says, when someone comes to us with a workers' compensation issue, one of the things we look for is a responsible third party to bring a lawsuit against or sue for the things workers' compensation doesn't pay for, like pain and suffering. As we've mentioned in previous posts in New York, you generally can't sue your employer for injuries you sustained on in an on-the-job accident, even if the accident was your employer's fault. However, you might be able to sue someone who is not your employer if they are responsible for your injuries. Someone who is not your employer in this situation is called a third party. In this post, we will discuss common examples of accidents, whatever. So sorry, this is probably going to be long, but just an example so we can try to talk about it. Is that a work-related car accident? Someone gets into a car accident for driving to work. All kinds of people drive as part of their jobs. If you are driving as part of your job and get into a car accident that isn't your fault, you may be able to sue the other driver in a third-party lawsuit. This means you could collect your workers' compensation. Okay, so I guess it's putting the blame on someone else then? Does that make sense? So maybe for, I guess then was the florist the third party because he felt hurt and suffered, and so he put the blame on that lady. I don't know. I feel like, let's see, the question is how do we address third party lawsuits? Oh, I don't know how long people have been able to sue other people, but I feel like it's a pretty common thing. And so I don't even know if there's anything we can do to stop that. But I guess when, like the question before, we were talking about trying to be fair and tolerant of others. I guess if we achieve that, then I bet it will be a lot less likely that people will try to sue other people and get back at them. I think personally, if somebody hurt my feelings and like if I was denied by somebody who wanted or who I asked to do flowers at my wedding, I probably would be okay and just never go back there and find a different florist and not even try to sue them or do anything. But so I guess if we try to achieve tolerance in our society, then third-party lawsuits would probably just fall under. And I don't know if this is answering the question, but that's my input.
I think that for the most part, you pretty much said what there is to be said about it. I think it really does just go back to the readings we did the other day, though, these questions. And I think it's just because that's what it sounds like, is that I think she would be the third party, because like that example where they're going to work, they're not suing their job because they're, working, even though that's what they're doing, is doing their job. They're not suing their work, they're suing the person who hit them. And that makes the person the third party. So it makes sense to me, because the person who refuses to do the flowers is doing it based on her religious beliefs. And that person is offended because of her religious beliefs, but is suing her. Maybe? I don't even know if that's right, but it kind of almost makes sense. But I'm not sure how we address them, other than what you said, is it has a lot to do with what we already talked about with tolerance.
Yeah, I guess if we're thinking with the religious freedom, not necessarily work, but I mean, it's just so frustrating because we have religious rights. We can practice our beliefs, and it's been like that since the beginning of our country. And what's frustrating is that people, so like the LGBT community, like we read about, it's basically their religion. It's what they believe and practice, and it basically is what rules their life. And for some religious people, like LDS, the same is with our religion. It basically encompasses everything that we are and do. And so if we're going to address third-party lawsuits with religious freedom, I don't think that we should, because we have the right to do what we want and to practice what we believe. And so nobody should be offended if we don't want to do something because we don't believe it's right. Like, that's part of our rights. And so I feel like if lawsuits happen, then they shouldn't, because we have the right to do as we believe. I don't know. So I think that they should just stay out of it if it's based on religious opinion. But then I guess, where do you draw the line? So it's a hard thing, but personally, I think that they should just stay out of it.
So this is kind of sort of off topic, maybe it isn't. But I was reading this article the other day about people who, mock Mormonism, and the article was called, where is it? It was called The Ignorance of Mocking Mormonism. And in it talked about how, well, first of all, it said that there was this federal judge who, there was this, basically, well, maybe it wasn't the federal judge, but anyway, someone said basically Mormons are just way too nice and they don't even worry about it because they're not going to sue me because they're just way too nice. They're not going to do that. And I thought about like religious freedoms and tolerances and how the LDS Church often reacts to different things. And I think that maybe that's the way that I wish society in general would act, and then things like these lawsuits wouldn't happen. Like, for example, the play The Book of Mormon, is totally mocking Mormonism, and the church could have, I don't know, like, I think that there are some organizations that if they were being mocked like that would be like, hey, I'm suing you, that's terrible, like, you're, you know what I mean? But I feel like but the church's response instead was to put that ad in their play, you know, in the, what is that thing called? The playbill, is that right? They put an ad in it saying like, you've seen the play, now read the book, like something like that. And so I feel like if more people would react that way to these different situations, and I feel like that was a good way to react, like, hey, like, I'm glad you enjoyed this like mockery, but go read the real book. No, you know, like we didn't choose to sue them. And I feel like there's so many people who would just, that's what they would do. They would choose to sue.
Okay, so total change of subject. My internet has been crapping out, so I only caught bits and pieces of your thing, and then I accidentally exited from the questions, and so if my internet is so slow and won't pick it up, I may have to have one of you guys read the questions. But I did have a thought before I had to switch to my phone. It had to do with what Corey was saying about when to draw the line, and I feel, if this is even on the same topic of what exactly it was you were saying, and if it's not, I apologize, with the story and the video that we watched and read in the book about the lady with the flowers, like how she had worked with this man for years and she had never had any problem with providing flowers for him to give to his partner or whatever, like there was no issue there. But then when it came to, like, so she wasn't discriminating against homosexual couples in any, you know, way, shape, or form or whatever. But when it came to that one instance, like, that I think is a good example of when it's, like, so long as you're serving them and, like, providing services to them, like, up until the marriage, like, I'm sure there's lots of Christians, they're like, yeah, it's fine, like, I don't care about, you know, making a cake for someone's wedding, like, you know, there's lots of people that don't have that issue, but for, like, in the instances that we read where because marriage meant what it meant to them, that it would go against their beliefs in doing so, like, I feel like if you're willing to serve homosexuals or any other group or class of people before that, like, I think that that's okay, if that makes sense. Like, I think that's where the line is drawn. If you're, like, doing it at any other time, I feel like states should recognize that law or recognize that right. But yeah, so sorry if that didn't go along with what you were saying, but those are my thoughts.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I think I was talking to my husband about this last night where, I mean, if somebody were to come in that I didn't agree with, like, it doesn't even have to be homosexual. It could be like a different religion that I don't believe in. I mean, obviously, I would always serve them. It's just like there's with a marriage that completely goes against your beliefs. And she was even respectful about it. She just said, she wasn't saying like, we can't be friends anymore, I'll never serve you flowers again. She just said she didn't feel okay about doing the flowers for his wedding because she didn't believe that that was okay. And so you're right. I think that there is a certain point to where you can have you can say no. And with this case, it was the wedding. Do you have the questions or do you, oh, sorry, Amber, you go.
No, you're good. So I was just going to say that I agree with you guys too. And I totally like, it all makes sense to me that like whenever it's a totally different thing saying that you are not willing to support something that you don't believe in, but you're not against that person and you're not being hateful towards them and you would serve them in any other way. But what's hard for me is that I know that their response would still be completely negative. I know that they would look at that and say, no, you're full of it because you're still completely against us because you're not willing to support us in our marriage. Or I have a really hard time with it because I have a cousin who's gay and he's getting married in the spring and I struggle with it. I struggle with the whole like thing because I want to be there and love him and support him and I want him to know how much I care about him, but at the same time, I don't agree with with same-sex marriage. And granted, it's legal, and he's not doing anything wrong, and I don't think that he is. It's so hard. There's just this weird line, and I just can't figure out how to, like, if he knew, like, if I were to voice my opinion in any way or not go because I don't believe in same-sex marriage or anything like that, I would be torn apart by, like, my whole family. So it's so hard. It is so incredibly hard. So as much as I can see, like, this is just because I don't believe in same-sex marriage. It has nothing to do with any of these people as a person, but they don't see it that way. They see it the complete opposite, honestly. They still see that as an attack. And that's where I really struggle, because I'm at a loss. I don't know how to respond.
I think you kind of have to find that balance of love and supporting, but the person, but not love and supporting like their belief. And I feel like that with the way we are, it's just that's going to be something that we're all going to struggle with for probably our entire lives.
And I think also, like, I don't know, because I have an uncle who is gay, and my grandma is very, like, very loving, but at the same time, she's very strictly, like, she's very religious. And so, like, I feel like, I don't know if she's ever talked to him about it, but I feel like in your situation, like, I don't know, like, I don't know if it would be, because I agree with what Soraya was saying, that, like, it's important for, I think for him in specific to understand, like, hey, like, I still love you, yes, but I don't agree with what you're doing. But, like, I don't know. And it's hard to say, like, I'm trying to figure out a better way to say this, but, like, so long as he knows that, like, it shouldn't matter what the other people think in the family, which I know is totally, like, that's not what I mean to say, but in a way that's kind of what I'm meaning to say. But I know that it's hard otherwise, especially with all those other family members that disagree or whatever. And if it were like, if he were to go telling everyone, like, hey, this, that, like, she said this, that, then yes, that would be a very difficult situation. But I feel like it needs to be taken like a person at a time. Like, whereas he's getting married, like, he needs to know, if you think that he needs to know how you feel about it, like, your thoughts on the matter. But even then, yes, I agree that that is a very difficult situation. So
Well, I don't necessarily think that I don't think I need to approach him and be like, just so you know, I don't agree with what you're doing. I don't think that's necessary at all. I just think, I guess my struggle is like the feelings that, like, my inner feelings that I have, and knowing how much I care about him, and knowing that I disagree with this part of his life that's so big for him. And it's really hard because he is very radical. Like, the things that he says on Facebook, and the things that, like, just in general, that he is very much like, if a one word was said about it, like, it wouldn't matter if I told him how much I cared about him and loved him. I could be bawling my eyes out explaining to him how much I cared about him, and he would still look at me and say, if that was true, you would support me, and you would, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I just, for me, it just feels like a lose no matter what situation with him. And not that I feel like this is a conversation that needs to happen with him, but if it were ever brought up, or if the issue with his wedding, and it's hard. I just think it's really hard.
I think with that, it just goes back to the belief that people have of, you have to agree with me or you hate me, pretty much. Like with the fairness or the justice for all type of thing. I don't know. I'm very sorry that you're having to, like, if that were to ever come up, that's what the reaction would be. So that is very unfortunate, yes, but also very hard. So I apologize. I do have the questions brought up if we're ready to go on. You can probably, or do we even need to? It's 10:30 now. Actually, I just want to cover the fourth question, just for the last question for the meeting. That says, what threat should the LDS Church be concerned about? And it gives a couple examples of, like, adoption, religious schools, etc. So I wondered, do any of you guys have any specific thoughts on any threats we should be concerned with?
I think that the threat that I hear the most about, that it seems like a lot of people are concerned about with the same-sex marriage laws, is the temple marriage. And a lot of the fear is that, and there are some countries where this is a thing, and the fear is that we won't be able to be married in the temple, but we will have to be married civilly and then sealed a year later. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things out there, because I guess it's the matter of marriage laws going in the way of we're not willing to marry same-sex couples, and that's another concern, is that that's going to be taken in the same way as the flower shop not willing to make flowers. If, say, a same-sex couple came and approached a bishop and wanted them to marry him, and he said, he would say no because that's completely against what we believe in, and that same-sex couple suing, and you know what I mean? Like, it could very easily, and even just with the laws that are in place, could be a thing, and I could see it happening, and it would just lead to a lot of other issues within, it would just cause a lot of problems within marriage and the temple marriage.
So I think that this is true. This is what I've heard. So when it first became legalized, they did actually respect, like, religious rights in this way, because they said that if anybody had, like, a written document that specifically stated what they believed in this case of same-sex marriage before the law was passed, that they would, that those beliefs would be acknowledged. And so this is where the Family Proclamation was super inspired, because we've had this since the 90s, I think the late 90s, and because we had that beforehand that says that we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, I don't think that they can touch the temples. I think that they that it has to be respected, that only members of the church who are worthy can enter a temple, and that it can only happen between a man and a woman, because beforehand we had that written down. And so I don't know if they'll ever change their mind about that, but I think that, God has his hand in this, and so we can see that with the proclamation. Like, that came years before this was even a problem, and it has helped us in that instance. So
I was thinking about that, and I thought that the one thing that they could bring up, if the church like ever got sued because we weren't letting gay people get married in the temple, they could bring up, well, not every church member gets married in the temple either. It's only like worthy people. So I think there's steps that, in case that ever happened, that it would prevent any major problems. And another thing is, if it ever had to be where we had to be married sealed civilly, and then we had to be sealed, I think they would not have us wait a year, because that wasn't always the case. My grandparents were sealed. They were married civilly one day, and 2 days later they got sealed because their temple was like 8 hours away. So I think if something ever happened to happen where we had to be married civilly before we got sealed, I think the church would change it so we wouldn't have to wait a year.
And I think with that, like, if it was like going along basically with everything you've said and probably just repeating everything you guys have just said, but where even if it wasn't like a same-sex couple, even if it was like a Baptist couple or this, that, like, that the same grounds would apply, that like, or like, if a same-sex couple were to use well, why can't I, like, going along that same lines, well, not everyone can, it's like and I think like wording would have to be very careful with that, because I feel like if you're to say, yeah, you have to be like, I don't know, to someone that's probably very emotionally hyped up, to say you have to be worthy to get married in the temple, that would probably just send them on a whole nother thing altogether. But I think and I love the videos that have come out, like, talking about, temples and stuff and why they're important and whatnot. Last night at the open house, my husband and I were standing outside, directing people like where to go. And there was like a Jewish rabbi. I have no idea where he was from, but like he was talking with some of the other older ushers, but a Jewish rabbi came and went through, and it was the coolest thing ever. And he was really nice, actually. I got to talk with him a little bit after. But like, I think like if people realize the importance of temples to us, then they should hopefully have a greater understanding of why. And then just a thought that I had talking about marriage, and if it were ever to be like that they took our rights away, I guess, of being married in the temple, then the Savior best be coming like pretty dang quickly, because that would be a very, very scary time. Because we know that the world's going to get worse, but also that like the saints are going to, you know, that good will still abound and stuff, but we just don't know what's going to be going down that's going to be super bad. If it's just going to be like physical wars between countries, or if it's going to continue to be like the war of religion against opinion, I guess. So, yeah. So if anyone has any final thoughts before the summary, take it away.
I just wanted to add quickly, I think that going on with what you were talking about, the temple, I think that the best way to respond to people is not calling them LDS temples, because really they're temples for the whole world, and people receive blessings like no matter what their faith is, because there are temples on earth. And so I think that we can just not saying that they need to be worthy, but that there's a certain lifestyle that we have to live in order to enter, because it's the Lord's house. And so you wouldn't even they wouldn't feel comfortable entering if they weren't living by what God has set as his, I guess, the lifestyle we're supposed to live. And so it's not that we're keeping people out, it's that you have to be willing to live a certain way in order to enter his house. And so I think if we look at it that way, then we can explain, like, he's asked us to be baptized and to live the word of wisdom and to be honest with our fellow men. And so I think if we talk about it that way, say we actually try to live the way God has asked us to, and that's why we can enter his house. And if we get married in his house, then we still continue to try to live that way. And so I think that just going about it that way would probably be more helpful. Not saying like, oh, only Mormons can go into the temple and we try to keep everybody out. Because I guess that's the point of missionary work, is to try to help people live a Christ-like life so that they can go to the temple. That's the ultimate goal. But if nobody has anything else, I can go with the summary. Okay, it was hard to type with her, but this is what I have. So we talked about fairness for all, and we need to instill the attitude in everyone so they actually want to live in a fair society. We need to address the issue of bigotry and respecting everyone. Fairness does not mean equality, but depending on how hard you work, your outcome will be different, and we need to understand that. We also need to know that the world is not fair and it might never be fair. So how then do we teach people? Maybe just start with where we are at and be an example to others. Issues start with how people respond to their feelings being hurt. Maybe fairness will never be achieved, but we can all try to learn tolerance and recognize that we go nowhere when we offend and hurt people. The third-party lawsuits we talked about. From a religious freedom standpoint, we have the right to live what we believe. If we can achieve tolerance, these lawsuits would not ever happen. A good reaction would be to sometimes just let things blow off and strive to be better. And then we talked about finding a balance of love in supporting the person that we disagree with, or that they disagree with us. To be okay with not. Okay, sorry. So try to find a balance between loving and supporting the person and not being okay with loving and supporting their action. It goes both ways, though. They can still love us and not support our beliefs, too. We need to find that balance. But it starts with the person at a time, and in the end, it is very hard. And then with temple marriages, will this ever be an issue with same-sex marriage? God has his hand in this work, and the proclamation to the world protects our beliefs of marriage between a man and a woman. Not even only LDS members is a qualification for a marriage in the temple. It is only worthy people. Realize the importance of temples, and if we realize the importance of temples, more people would respect it.